Tonight, taking aim at Canada's credit card debt.
My bills, they're going to jump up about $200 a month.
Quebec hikes the minimum monthly payment. Will the new rules help fix a growing debt problem or just make things even tougher for Canadians struggling to get by?
Passengers on an Air Transat flight to Toronto say they endured 6 grueling hours on a tarmac in Rome with little food, sporadic air conditioning, and even less information. We look into why airlines just don't let passengers off the plane.
And don't be fooled by their size. These tiny ticks carry a big threat.
Risk for Lyme disease is increasing in Canada.
Sometimes it's helpful to tuck your pants into your socks.
Where to look for them and how to protect yourself. This is The National. Credit card debt hangs like a dark cloud over many Canadians, but Quebec is trying something new, starting today, to force people to get out from under it. First, consider debt in general. Collectively, Canadians have racked up more than $2.3 trillion worth. Put another way, for every dollar we make, we owe about $1.78. Focus just on credit card debt, and it's another big number, about $4,000 consumers owe on average. The problem, of course, is the interest. That's money that evaporates into thin air, goes right to the banks. Quebec's plan is to make people pay those credit card debts sooner by raising the monthly minimums. But as Sarah Levitt shows us, there is a clear trade-off.
They're buried in a block of ice.
Mark Griffin doesn't want to tempt himself, so he keeps his credit cards out of reach.
I brought my credit cards in today, but the funny thing is I had to take them out of my freezer because I had them frozen in a block of ice in my freezer.
The Montrealer turned to credit cards to pay his bills after he lost his job during the 2008 economic crisis.
I've been stuck carrying around this debt, slowly hammering away at it for the last decade.
He's still chipping away at about $20,000 on 4 credit cards. Starting today in Quebec, minimum payments will jump to 5% of the balance on new credit cards. Existing cardholders will pay 2%, increasing to 5% by 2025. Consumer advocates say other provinces will be watching what Quebec is doing closely.
The government thought that debt problems is critical on some cases.
Griffin is not alone in his debt. According to Equifax, the average Canadian consumer debt is around $23,000, excluding mortgages. In Quebec, that debt is closer to $19,000 on average.
We've gone away from being a nation of savers to a nation of savers to a nation of borrowers. And so when we have unexpected financial emergencies, we don't have the resources to rely upon savings.
Consider a credit card with a rate of 19.9% and a 2% minimum payment. A $1,000 bill will take 26 years to pay off, and you'd pay $3,000 in interest. If the minimum payment goes up to 5%, that same bill will take 6 years to pay off, and you'd pay about $442 interest. The problem, Griffin says, is the immediate effect, short-term pain for long-term gain.
My bills, they're going to jump up about $200 a month. Which is going to be hard on me.
Griffin has taken on a lower interest personal loan with the goal of paying off all his credit card debt. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Okay, now Mark's story may or may not sound like your own, but with so many Canadians in debt, it's worth asking if this kind of change in the rules really goes the distance. So joining us now, Rubina Ahmed-Haq, a personal finance expert. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Mark is very clearly in a difficult situation, but tell me, how effective a strategy is it to pay even 5% on a credit card balance every month?
So I think what Quebec is doing is a step in the right direction, but really the problem is lack of financial education and financial literacy. So even if you were to take that 5% example, it will take you years to pay off a small $1,000, $2,000 bill. And so that's what we need to teach people, is that paying minimum or even 5% is going to increase your time that it takes to pay something off, and that you should be really paying the full balance off every month.
But in your experience, for people who habitually make the minimum monthly payment, is it a financial literacy issue, or is it because they simply can't afford to pay any more than that?
It's definitely a combination of both. It starts off as a person who doesn't have financial literacy skills, a lack of financial education. Maybe money wasn't a big topic in your home growing up. You get to university or college, you get that credit card, and you just start spending. And then you've got student debt. And as life goes on, things compound. You've got a mortgage, you've got kids, you've got car payments. And then all you can do is make minimum payments. So maybe even at that point, if all of a sudden you've got financial education, you're not able to do more than just pay the minimum.
Okay, so beyond giving everyone the advice that they love to get, which is don't spend money you don't have, I mean, how would you frame the problem so as to help people avoid getting into this mess in the first place?
Well, I think the number one thing is to teach people about how quickly credit card debt can add up. So as we talk about compound interest on investments and how quickly we can make money over time, it's the same thing when it comes to your debt, how quickly it can get worse and worse because you're paying interest on interest that you have accumulated. And so I think financial education is the key so that people know that when they make a purchase, I've got to have that money in the bank. A credit card is a tool, not a resource. So always make sure that you have that in mind when you're shopping.
Okay, Rubina, thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Well, the Canadian election campaign hasn't quite begun yet, but the Prime Minister was on the road today, and it is clear he has his sights set on October. Justin Trudeau was in the Canadian North to announce plans for a new protected marine area off Ellesmere Island in Nunavut. It's called Tuvaluituk, meaning the place where the ice never melts. And it's home to many species that depend on its year-round sea ice. With this new designation, Inuit will still be allowed to hunt and fish, but most other human activity will be banned, at least for now. A bit further south, Trudeau also announced the completion of the Talurutuyup-Imanga Conservation Zone off of Baffin Island. Now, he wants to show that he can deliver on core commitments to climate change and reconciliation. And as Salima Shivji tells us, he threw in a few jabs at his opponent, too.
At this remote northern outpost, the Prime Minister got a prime view of the waters his government is working to protect.
What's your name? Good to see you, Junior. Hey.
Where the Inuit live with the effects of a rapidly warming north. This is now a marine conservation site, and the local communities will reap some of the benefits. It's a change the Prime Minister came to the north to highlight on his second trip to Iqaluit in an election year.
The climate crisis is changing the face of the Arctic as we know it.
They're also promising to create a new protected marine area in the high Arctic, one of the last spots that has sea ice all year round, whose name, Tuvaluituk, translates to where the ice never melts. Negotiating the final regulations will take years, but an interim protection means there will be no oil or gas drilling, deep-sea mining, or any other activity that could harm the waters in the meantime. And the Liberals can say they're delivering on a campaign promise, a promise they've now met and surpassed. For elders like John Amagwalak, this is a long time coming.
When the oil companies came rushing up here looking for oil, we became very concerned, and 50 years later, we're finally getting the kind of protection we've been fighting for a long, long time.
It's also politically everything the Liberals want to be talking about with an election around the corner, tackling climate change and working with First Nations, with a few sideswipes at their opponents.
In July, Andrew Scheer traveled to Whitehorse and outlined his vision for the Arctic. Not once did he mention the word Inuit.
This is what voters will keep hearing from the Liberals as we inch closer to that fall election campaign, using a backdrop of melting ice to try to convince Canadians they are serious on climate, expected to be a key issue this fall in Nunavut as much as anywhere else. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Canadians will soon mark the first full year of legal cannabis. For most, the transition has been smooth. Many Canadians may not see much difference in their lives, but for those with old pot convictions, legalization has not solved all of their problems yet. Olivia Stefanovic explains Ottawa's new effort to wipe those slates clean.
Glenn Taddison is planning a trip, his first abroad in almost 50 years, since a small amount of pot got him a criminal record.
It would be a new life for me. I'd be able to do things again and feel free to cross the border, and it's freedom. Everybody's entitled to a second chance.
Now Taddison and thousands of other Canadians with simple cannabis possession records are getting that opportunity.
By applying for a no-fee, no-wait time pardon for cannabis possession, people can finally shed the burden and stigma of that criminal record and move forward positively with their lives.
The federal government says this will make it easier for people to apply for jobs, school, and travel abroad. But it's not without its critics, who say it still puts the onus on the individual.
The federal Liberal government has touted this as a massive step forward, when in reality it's a laudable effort, but does not go nearly far enough to address the historical injustices associated with simple cannabis possession offenses.
He wants to see all those offenses expunged, an idea the Justice Minister shot down.
We're moving with a process that's efficient, that takes into account also the fact that police agencies and the court system across Canada have different record-keeping procedures, and an application-based pardon process is one that will most quickly and most efficiently allow people to clear their record.
A pardon removes the record from Canada's police database, but it does not erase the fact that someone was convicted of a crime, something customs officers could still find out about. Taddison is looking into the process so that he won't be turned back from the border again.
And to travel again openly would be a great feeling. Just to have a second life before I go. That's all I'm asking.
Experts say this could make it easier for those with a simple possession record to travel to the U.S. But their advice, if asked by foreign officials about your criminal past, don't lie. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Okay, moving on, Ian. I was on a flight yesterday from Boston. I got stuck on the tarmac for 2 hours, big rainstorm, but that ain't nothing compared to this next story.
Imagine 6 hours, Andrew. That's what passengers on an Air Transat flight in Rome endured earlier this week. Some telling CBC News it was grueling, the air conditioning working only sporadically. Air Transat, for the record, says that's not the case. Still, being stuck in a plane on the tarmac for that long can be frustrating. So why can't passengers be allowed to exit earlier? Our Katie Nicholson went looking for answers.
Why not just let passengers off the plane? We put that question to people who work in the industry. Now, they say a lot depends on why your plane isn't going anywhere. The most common reasons for a delay are weather, maintenance, not enough room in the sky, not enough room at the gate, and a shortage of ground crew and customs officials. So, for example, if it's a weather issue, it may be unsafe to deplane because of lightning. If there are no gates or not enough staff at the airport to assist in deplaning, you're stuck on the tarmac. And there are other considerations. If a plane leaves its position, it may lose its place in line to take off, and an unscheduled deplaning costs the airline thousands of dollars. Whose call is it to deplane? It may feel like the pilot and the flight crew are holding you hostage, but they tell us the ultimate decision to deplane or stay on the tarmac rests with the airline itself. Are crews telling the truth? When you're stuck on the tarmac, it may feel like you're being pushed around, and it may also feel like you're not getting the full story. But flight crews from different airlines that we spoke with say they are trained to tell you the truth and to bring you up to speed as soon as they learn of new developments. But here's the thing, those flight crews also tell us they are often the last ones to know what's happening further up the line. What does the new Passenger Bill of Rights mean if a delay happens to you? Under the new rules, if you're stuck on the tarmac, you are entitled to some legislated comforts. Working bathrooms, proper ventilation like heating or cooling, food and drink, and the ability to communicate with people outside the plane free of charge. And the bill also forbids airlines from keeping passengers on the tarmac for more than 3 hours and 45 minutes if your flight is in Canada. Even though the Bill of Rights entitles you to all these things, seasoned flight attendants we spoke with said you should always plan ahead and bring a snack and something to entertain yourself with just in case you hit a delay.
That is Katie Nicholson in Toronto tonight. We're live here on The National and tracking several developing stories. Police in Toronto searching for suspects involved in the fatal shooting of a teenager.
This is the second shooting this month! I don't get it! He was a kid!
It happened last night in North York. A 16-year-old found dead in the stairwell of a Toronto community housing property where he lived. Friends and family have identified him as Hanid Abdullahi. They say he had been playing video games in the building next door and was headed home. 3 men were seen fleeing the area in a dark-colored Honda. And a Quebec hydro plant is being investigated in the deaths of more than 2,000 fish. They've been washing up on riverbanks in Ottawa and Gatineau since mid-July. Necropsies on the first wave of fish determined they likely died from a toxic spill. But Quebec's environment minister says there hasn't been a spill. A command post will be set up near the plant. We turn now to the Congo, where a grim anniversary is being met with new concerns. Today, the focus of a year-long Ebola outbreak turned to the city of Goma, where a number of new cases have emerged. As Susan Ormiston explains, officials are working to prevent the spread of the virus, as well as the anxiety that comes with it.
It's a sign of rising panic that Rwanda closed its border for a while with Congo this morning, stranding hundreds and igniting fear and suspicion. We don't know if they found someone with Ebola at the border, she said, or is there a Congolese person sick with Ebola in Rwanda? Turns out neither was true, and closing borders is a dangerous move, according to the World Health Organization, speaking by video conference from the DRC.
This sends an epidemic underground, and we've seen this throughout history. If you look at the history of the Black Plague, that's exactly what happened as well. If you start making people terrified, you close things down, they run away, they hide, and they spread disease.
Eastern Congo borders 4 other countries, and no one wants to see Ebola break through. 1 year ago today, the first case emerged inside Congo, and there have been 2,600 since. Over 2/3 of those people have died.
And the longer it continues to circulate in this area, the more likely we'll see a chain of transmission established in another part of this country or a neighboring country. And we really can't afford to do that.
So a small army suits up every day, feverishly trying to identify anyone who might be affected, tackling the stigma and jabbing a vaccine into as many people as they can. Now over 170,000 Congolese vaccinated, trying desperately to keep ahead of it.
We're responding to an outbreak of this high-threat pathogen, but in the context of a war zone. So in terms of degree of difficulty scales, we're at the top of the degree of difficulty scale in terms of responding to this outbreak.
Mostly the disease has shown up in rural areas. But this week, when a 3rd case erupted in Goma, a city of 2 million close to Rwanda, that's what raised fresh alarm. The WHO is assessing that threat, and by later today, Rwandan officials were convinced to reopen that border. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, London.
And still ahead on The National, why ticks are now spreading to cities across Canada. The threat plus tips you need to know.
And surviving a grizzly bear attack.
I was trying to peel its lips back or its mouth back, and it bit me in the arm and bit my foot and then bit this leg a few times.
How a BC man's hike almost turned deadly. His story is next. But first, for more than a week, this is as close as we've come to seeing Briar Schmigelski and Cam McLeod. Pictures of the 2 young men suspected in 3 killings in British Columbia. But with no new leads, the town of Gillam in northern Manitoba is wondering when life may return to normal. The international media is gone, so is the military, and the RCMP is scaling back. Today in the town, a mixture of relief and frustration.
Some people are feeling that it's time for them to put down their guard and go back to normalcy, and other people are still holding up and wanting the security of their house and locking the doors.
Those concerns will be discussed tomorrow. A community meeting is being held for residents to ask what happens next, even request counseling services.
I'm behind anyone's decisions on how they want to react to this. I'll support them.
There's like hardly any crime here. So like when we heard about there's wanted fugitives, that like everyone's on alert.
The search is continuing, but the RCMP concedes it isn't sure where the suspects are. So it's asking Canadians to report anything suspicious to police.
This particular bear had started to sneak back around behind the officers and had come in between the group of officers as they were walking in a line, and so sneaking behind the first officer. So consequently, that's when it was euthanized.
The bear he's referring to is the one that attacked a man north of Powell River on Vancouver Island earlier this week. Officers identified it by knife wounds inflicted by the victim, Colin Dowler, as he fought for his life. Dowler's still in hospital, but he shared his dramatic story with the CBC's Tanya Fletcher today. And a warning, some of the images are disturbing.
And I was thinking I'm not going to make it, right? And that was, yeah, it's pretty freaking scary.
Colin Dowler's nightmare hit on the eve of his 45th birthday in BC's backcountry. This was the last photo taken of him before he cycled away down a logging road, all alone, or so he thought. That's when he met the bear. As it approached, Dowler reached for a ski pole.
And he was getting really close to me, so I just kind of poked it on his head.
That's when the bear knocked him to the ground.
Kind of grabbed me by the stomach and kind of pushed me down, dragged me towards a ditch, maybe 50 feet, and I tried eye gouging it away, but it didn't really work. And
the thing he remembers most, the sound of teeth against bone.
I was mostly chewing on this thigh, and I was trying to peel its lips back or its mouth back, and it bit me on the arm and bit my foot and then bit this leg a few times. And
suddenly he remembered the knife in his pocket, a gift from his father just 2 weeks earlier.
Used both hands to pull underneath the bear to get to that knife, put it in this hand and stabbed the bear in the neck, and it let go of me immediately and was bleeding quite badly. And
he managed to crawl back to his bike in unbearable pain. From there, he rode 7 kilometers to a construction camp where he collapsed. 5 workers quickly came to his aid. His wife says they saved his life.
He definitely wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for them. And I'm just happy that my husband is as stubborn as he is.
His doctors say his sheer determination helped too.
Yes, he had quite serious injuries, and it's surprising he was able to get himself out of that situation as he did, and ride his bike as far as he did.
Here I am now. Yeah, they saved my life.
Simple words of thanks from a man grateful to be alive. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
Wow, okay, still ahead on The National. Finding new hope in Canada. We revisit Shaquila's journey to freedom.
And later in our moment, the other Old Town road that has people talking.
The sign is constantly being stolen, taken off of there. And so we thought, okay, well, this is what's happening, and how can we take this negative and turn it into a positive?
Hers is a story of courage, strength, and medical might. You may remember Shaquila Zareen. We introduced you to her more than a year ago after she came to Canada as a refugee. By then, she had survived being shot in the face by her husband and was fighting to rebuild her life and her body here. Laura Lynch spent a lot of time with her and her family as they navigated the physical and emotional ups and downs. And tonight, we revisit her story.
This is the day Shaquila Zareen, her mother and sister, have been waiting for. It's just moments before she goes into surgery to rebuild her face. There is so much at stake. The surgery poses relatively little risk, but it's frighteningly easy for Shaquila and her family to recall what she's endured, what they've all endured. It's been a long journey to get here, but Shaquila hopes today marks a turning point in her incredible story of survival and resilience. They were fast-tracked into Canada as refugees just over a year ago. Her fractured face a constant reminder of the danger she left behind. Shaquila has had to be strong. forced to marry at 16, her abusive husband shot her in the face. Her mother, Sharman John, heard her screams that night. Her injuries were horrific. Shotgun fragments scattered and lodged in her head, half her face missing. Fearing for their lives, they fled to India. There were 9 surgeries in 3 years. All the while, her husband still threatening to find and kill her.
I'd like to try this.
In Vancouver, she's found safety. Pulled out of school as a child, she wants to work, but her sight in her remaining eye is poor.
I'm just looking right now, thank you.
At her bedside, a reminder of what she's lost.
به خاطر که درد دارم میخوایم بهترشم، به خاطر که همین استقانی که اینجا نفس کشیدن میتونم میخوایم برای جور کنن. فقط من میخوایم این موقع بعد چیزایی که نیاز دارم برای من جور کنن که من یک ذره صحتمند شم.
Hi. Good morning, sir. How are you? I'm Dale.
I'm
Kevin Bush. Nice to meet you. Dr. Bush. These all the x-rays and stuff that she has?
Within weeks of her arrival, Shakila meets with one of Vancouver's top plastic surgeons, Kevin Bush.
Now, I know you've had quite a few surgeries. Do you remember what they were?
Not wanting to miss a word, she brings an interpreter.
There was first I could not breathe, so they opened up a hole through my throat.
Tracheostomy?
Right.
Okay.
The damage to Shakila's face so severe, surgeons in India turned to the rest of her body to repair it.
So they took some muscles from down in your leg, and then they hooked them up to some blood vessels up here. Is that right?
Yes.
And yet there's still so much more to do.
Why don't you come and sit right up there if you want.
The scars run deep, some visible.
Okay, so that's all gone. Okay.
Some unseen. But they surface in one devastating question.
My will I get my face back?
Yeah, you know, I think we can do some things to make things better for you, okay? But if you said, am I going to look exactly the way I did before I had my injury, I'm going to have to tell you that that's not going to be possible.
Okay.
So this is actually really quick. You're just going to be about 5 minutes.
And so there's really no choice. She has to keep going. It could be a year before surgeons are prepared to do the operation. That means there's time to actually step into a new life. She arrived a victim. Now she's finding her voice.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maha for everyone.
Shakila has been attending this peer support training group. It's for women new to Canada, and it's been key to her growing belief in herself.
Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense. Thank you.
In fact, today is graduation day. It's a proud first. But maybe more important are all the friends she's made.
I am very happy. I feel I am not alone anymore.
That self-assurance propels her forward. Sharing her story.
Do not be silent in the face of violence. It is up to you to fight.
A warrior from a faraway land whose weapons are words, inspiring Canadian women in Ottawa.
I would never be quiet. Thank you so much. Hello. Yeah, Shakila.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Welcome to Parliament.
Thank you so much. It is beautiful.
She takes her message right to the top.
Well, this is where we receive all heads of state, and this is the walk that they do, the Prime Minister.
A woman who once had no power, now walking Canada's halls of power.
Prime Minister Chair, and I took a couple.
There's Prime Minister Shakila.
Yeah.
Oh, Speaker's Chair, fantastic.
Yes. خیلی خوشحال شدم شما رو دیدم.
The emotional highlight, though, is meeting fellow Afghan refugee, now Cabinet Minister Mariam Monsef.
من خیلی خوشحال میشم که یعنی زنای افغان رو میبینم. شما چه قوی هستین، میخوایم همگی مثل شما باره. یعنی بیدار شوند، یعنی صدای خود بکشن. یعنی بتونن از حق خود دفاع کنن.
مثل شما. مثل شما.
Hi. Nice to meet you too.
And then the man she's been so eager to speak with arrives. Immigration Minister Ahmed Hussein.
I read about your story and I know.
Shakila knows she has the spotlight and she seizes it.
یعنی برای من پیسی که میتونن خیلی کم است.
She's talking about her own personal challenges, right? She's come here, whether it's economic issues that she's experiencing. She has disabilities that she was describing earlier.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
She's even wily enough to serve up her main message.
This is for you.
In her own words, in the form of a gift.
I want every woman to remember that we're not victims, we're the survivors, the warriors, and we're super women, power to all. Thank you very much. So that's a very
Thank you.
Meanwhile, back in Vancouver, the medical teams have been working, preparing, and Dr. Bush is just about ready.
Okay, so this operation is complicated in that there's been previous injury and surgery.
The planning is meticulous.
So there are these bone fragments that are still in there that are covered up. We're going to try and find those.
Right, so these are other actual pieces of her skull that have been displaced.
Yeah, these are pieces of her cheek that have been just shattered and pushed into this position.
If the team can find those bone fragments, they'll use them to rebuild her eye socket. Then they'll take a bone graft from her leg to build the missing cheekbone. Her eye hangs down so much that she says she doesn't even want to lean over reading because it falls out. Will it?
Yeah, that's the idea. The idea is to try and support that prosthetic so that it's not just hanging in the soft tissues. It'll be hopefully better, and that will give her a better look.
And Dr. Bush shares something else, something Shakila has been waiting months to hear. I said that you're going to have your operation in 10 days. A week from Friday, you'll be.
Oh, I'm happy. Really?
Yes, really.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I know. I wanted to.
Thank you. That is what. Give me a second.
Two teams working with Dr. Brown down below is doing the fibula, and that's been planned out with all those computer-guided things that we went through the other day. And what we're doing up here is finding the pieces. And so
all the preparation, all the planning comes down to this.
So we found this piece, and we're working on this piece now. And then we may have to rebuild this little piece here. This one's a little hard to find.
So on track?
Yeah, on track.
On track for a surgery that ends up lasting 14 hours and goes according to plan. Three months later, Shakila's back in the spotlight. She's healing well, yet more surgeries lie ahead.
Shakila Zareen is the winner of the Shakti Award for Courage.
Poised, gracious, no longer in the shadows.
Thank you so much.
Tonight, she's honored.
Thank you.
Rising above the pain of the past, she will never be silenced again. Laura Lynch, CBC News, Vancouver.
Since then, Shaquila has had other operations too, including a major one to rebuild her nose. And there will be more later to recreate her jaw, replace her teeth, and she's gaining some independence too, now living on her own in a studio apartment with help from social housing.
Still ahead on The National, out of the country into the city, the growing threat of the tiny black-legged tick.
This is something we want every doctor to understand, that the risk for Lyme disease is increasing in Canada.
Where the bacteria-carrying insects are now being found and how you can protect yourself.
I'm Jamie Poisson. Tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast, Front Burner, a look at the Saudi Crown Prince's $500 billion vision for the future, which includes flying cars, genetic editing, and an artificial moon. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We are live on The National and tracking a story out of Australia. We just got this video of the memorial service held tonight in Sydney for Lucas Fowler. The 23-year-old Australian and his American girlfriend were shot and killed more than 2 weeks ago on a remote stretch of highway in northern BC. Fowler's father is a senior police officer in Australia and delivered the eulogy, saying his son lived a life that many of us envy and will live on in their hearts. An Enbridge gas pipeline ruptured in Kentucky, killing one person and sending 5 others to hospital. Police in a people in a rural community were sent running from their homes as a fireball shot into the sky early this morning. Officials say at least 6 structures were set on fire. Calgary-based Enbridge says it's investigating. And Baltimore police are looking into a break-in at the home of U.S. Congressman Elijah Cummings. Officials say the burglary occurred early Saturday morning. That's just hours before U.S. President Donald Trump began criticizing Cummings. He tweeted the congressman's district, which includes Baltimore, was rat and rodent infested and a very dangerous and filthy place. Not clear if anything was taken from Cummings' home.
Until such time as there's a deal, we'll be taxing them.
And Donald Trump is hitting China with more tariffs, 10% on $300 billion worth of imports. That's in addition to the 25% he already imposed on $250 billion of products. American and Chinese negotiators wrapped up a round of trade talks yesterday. Still no sign of a deal, but negotiations are set to resume next month.
Well, they may be incredibly small, but ticks can cause some serious health issues. And some say the chances of being bitten are rising. Those insects can carry the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. In the space of a year, cases of the disease have doubled in Canada, and those tiny ticks are appearing in surprising places. Our Christine Burak examines why.
They're not just crawling around backwoods anymore. Black-legged ticks are now in tall grasses and wooded areas in big cities.
I do know a few people who have been affected by Lyme disease, but I don't really take any precautions for myself.
It's time to start. Rising temperatures are allowing the bloodsuckers to survive through winter and spread Lyme disease in places they couldn't before. The number of confirmed infections has more than doubled from about 1,000 in 2016 to more than 2,000 a year later. Most of those cases were in Nova Scotia, Quebec, parts of Ontario, and Manitoba. Now Lyme disease has also moved into southern Ontario, PEI, and BC.
This is something we want every doctor to understand, that the risk for Lyme disease is increasing in Canada.
Symptoms can include fever, fatigue, and a skin rash that looks like a bullseye. And if you spot a tiny tick latched onto the skin, carefully remove it immediately and go see a doctor.
There's a preventive antibiotic that can be given right away, and that's important. That's an early intervention, and it stops the spread of bacteria in the body.
Left untreated, Lyme disease can cause muscle pain, spread to joints and the heart.
It's like a spider trying to stick in a garden hose, right? Like there's a lot of force going through there.
That green line is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. It's clinging to the blood vessel of a mouse.
And it's moving so fast that you can't even see it. Like it's just a streak of light at most.
Tara Moriarty is part of a larger Canadian Lyme research team. She's looking for ways to disable the bacteria.
Being able to understand this will help us to develop treatments.
A human vaccine for Lyme disease is being tested, but won't be available for at least 3 years.
You'd be sliding this right along your skin, right at the site where the tick is biting.
At this outdoor store, the best advice is prevention. Insect repellent with DEET can keep ticks away. Light-colored clothing can make the insect that's about the size of a poppy to watermelon seed easier to see. And
sometimes it's helpful to tuck your pants into your socks as well. Not super fashion forward, but it is effective.
And when you get home from places like this, don't just check the dog for ticks. Check yourself. A new threat requires a new routine.
Hello.
Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
And up next on The National, it's been #1 on the charts for a record number of weeks, but Old Town Road is also an Old Town Road.
Well, look, if you want to steal the sign, if it's that important to you, well, maybe we can find an alternative for you. You can now buy the sign.
A BC Town solution to an unusual problem. That's next in our moment. But first, in case you missed it, Woodstock 50 is dead. This just 2 weeks before the music festival was supposed to happen. Now, it's not coming as a total surprise. The big anniversary concert was plagued with problems since it was announced back in March. After relocating from New York to Maryland, big acts like Miley Cyrus, Jay-Z, and the Raconteurs, they bailed. Then classic bands from the first Woodstock who were planning to perform also canceled. So bye-bye Santana, Country Joe McDonald. Oh, and tickets reportedly cost as much as $600. It's a bad turn for the festival's co-founder, Michael Lang, who, by the way, was the chief architect of every Woodstock since the first one, some of which have also gone badly. Take Woodstock 94. Many thought it a cynical cash grab. And then 5 years later, Woodstock 99. It ended in complete disaster. Organizers were blamed for choosing a venue with no infrastructure, no shade from the blistering sun, for charging way too much money for everything from tickets to bottled water, and even for booking too many aggressive metal bands. 3 days later, what was left of the festival basically burned to the ground. So, all things considered, maybe Woodstock 50's demise is not the worst thing ever?
It turns out the phrase Old Town Road doesn't just belong to the record-setting song, #1 all summer. It's also the name of an actual road in Sicamous, BC, and the sign on that road keeps getting stolen. But you know what? The city's not stressed about the theft. They're taking it in stride, even making their own Old Town Road signs and selling them. Those signs and the old town behind them is our moment.
We have this Old Town Road.
I'm gonna take my horse through the Old Town Road. I'm gonna.
Over the last 2 months, all of a sudden we put up a sign, then it's gone. Then we put up another sign, and it's gone. And so we thought, okay, well, this is what's happening, and how can we take this negative and turn it into a positive? So our staff got creative, and we thought, we'll make up a bunch of signs, and if they want the signs, we'll sell them the signs. Here you go now, folks. You don't have to steal it anymore. You can actually take it.
Can't nobody tell me nothing.
Let's face it, Old Town Road and the song by Billy Ray Cyrus has just absolutely gone viral. I'm going to ride my horse to the Old Town Road. I'm going to ride my horse to the Old Town Road.
Hat down, cross town, living like a rock star.
I even danced to this song. I love the hand parts of it, you know, and that. We want to make it fun, and because that's what Sicamous is. It's a fun little town.
I love everything about that song. I love everything about the video, the moment Billy Ray Cyrus signed. So this just adds to it. Sicamous is a beautiful town. The mayor is embracing it. And as I understand it, Andrew, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're basically selling these signs at cost, not even trying to make money off it. So it's just, everything about this is great.
So just on the first thing you said, can I say, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is kind of controversial, but why is this song still as popular today as it was when it first came? Like, it's catchy, I get it, but still?
I know the answer to that. They've done so many different remixes and videos. It's helped propel it. And the mayor's going to do a video tomorrow.
Oh, is that so? Okay, well, I'll be on YouTube watching for it. That's The National for this August 1st. Have a good night.
Good night.